What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound brought to you by the Hockey News. I am your host, Emma Lingan. I am joined today by Michael Augello and Jonathan Bailey, also of the Hockey News. We are here and we are so excited to be so close to real, meaningful hockey, just a couple of days away. So we've got lots to talk about. We are kicking off our division preview series today, starting with the Metro division. So we're going to bring you all the latest and greatest from around the division. But before we do, want to remind you that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. All right, kicking things off with the Metropolitan division today, folks. I am very glad that we've got John here to give us his insight. He covers the Philadelphia Flyers here at the Hockey News, so we're going to get some more insight from him. But do want to start actually in New Jersey. So let's look at the Devils first. That's the first team I want to talk about here. So, of course, they were a big story in the offseason. They finally got Luke Hughes locked up to a contract, 7 years, 9 million AAV. So, now that they've gotten that done, let's look at their decor. So, Devils decor looks like Jonas Siegenthaler, Dougie Hamilton, Luke Hughes, Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon, Simon Nemetz, and Jonathan Kovacevic, who is on IR. He's recovering from knee surgery. He is missed training camp. But overall, that's what the decor looks like. So they've made some forward additions like Evgeny Dadonov, Connor Brown over the summer. They really haven't made any changes on the back end to those names that I just mentioned. So, Mike, I'll start with you. Do you think that that list of names that I just mentioned is going to be good enough for a contending team in the Metro?
I think it is, but as has always been the case with the Devils, the most important person, the most valuable player on their team may be the team doctor because they have not been able to stay healthy. And that has severely wounded them over the years. Jack Hughes, he's a great player, but he has not been able to be durable enough to be around. The 1 year that he almost scored 100 points. Dougie Hamilton is an excellent offensive defenseman, but he has had a slew of injuries throughout his career. I thought the Luke Hughes deal was a little overpriced, but I understand the reason why they did it, because I think in a couple of years they want a third Hughes brother, and now they have two of them locked up. I look at the Devils and I say this is a really good team, but they need to stay healthy. They're not so deep that they can absorb an injury like a Hughes or a Hamilton. So I think they could win the division, but health will be a big thing for them.
Yeah, John, I know you've got some familiarity, some experience covering the Devils as well. So what do you think of this decor? Again, like Mike said, that if they can stay healthy, it's a big if, but how do you see them sort of measuring up, stacking up against the rest of the division?
I think they got to be up there. I think, like Mike said, if they stay healthy, there's no reason to believe they can't win the division. Kovacevic is out probably, past the new year. I think Tom Fitzgerald said at least till the new year. So you're looking at 3 to 4 months of Simon Nemetz. He had a rough year last year. He wasn't fully healthy for most of the year, but then he was playing like his best hockey in the playoffs. So if he can do that again, you don't have to worry about Kovacevic as much. Hamilton, I could see maybe starting to lose a role to Luke Hughes, who also had an offseason shoulder surgery. So there's a little bit to consider there. They were great defensively, like through Christmas, and then after Christmas, it all just kind of fell apart at the seams. Like Hamilton got hurt. Hughes was out for the season at the wrong time, Jack Hughes. So there is an element of luck, I guess you could say, with health, but on paper, like if you put the best team together for all 82 games, they are one of the best teams in the division and in the East altogether. So we'll see where that goes. But defensively, they were great last year, and I don't see why they wouldn't be again.
Well, sticking with defense, that is a great segue into my next question. I want to go over to Columbus. So, Zach Werenski, of course, Norris Trophy finalist for Columbus last year. He had an incredible season. He led his team in scoring. He set single season records for a Blue Jackets defenseman in goals, assists, and points. He had 82 points, 23 goals, 59 assists last year. So he was also second in scoring among all NHL defensemen behind only Cale Makar. So this was obviously one of the biggest storylines around the NHL last year, was Zach Werenski really having this breakout season. So Mike, do you expect that same kind of level of production from him again? And do you think that it'll be enough to carry the Blue Jackets to a playoff appearance? Because they really weren't all that far off from it last year.
No, they weren't. And it's tough to predict or expect a defenseman to score at a point per game pace. He's a phenomenal defenseman offensively. He's going to be on Team USA for the Olympics. He was a Norris finalist. With Columbus, I look at one thing in terms of their outlook for this season. Their goaltending is a big question mark. Is Jet Greaves for real? Elvis Merzlikins could be one of the worst contracts in the NHL. They go out and they get Ivan Fedotov from Philadelphia. How does he factor in? And can some of the players who played inspired hockey, like Sean Monahan in the wake of the Johnny Gaudreau tragedy, can they repeat that? Plus, they have a lot of youngsters like Adam Fantilli and Kent Johnson who are really growing into core player roles. Can they step up even more? So there are a lot of ifs there. I don't know whether Columbus can make the playoffs, but there's a lot of talent there. And I think if there's one or two pieces added, they could be a team that makes the final 8.
Yeah, I mean, we really, as you said, Mike, we saw them play inspired hockey last year. So, I mean, John, how realistic is it, do you think, to expect them to build on that this year? Do you think it was more of a flash in the pan situation, or do you think this is kind of the start of something here for Columbus?
I think you can account for the Gaudreau tragedy in a way, right, with Monahan and some of the guys that knew Johnny. But at the same time, you also have to consider the young guys who are going to inevitably improve. I know Mike mentioned Fantilli, Kent Johnson, another year of Marchenko, another year of Voronkov. And, Werenski, he could do it again. I mean, he doesn't have to. You don't have to be Superman all the time. You could be Clark Kent sometimes. The Blue Jackets re-signed Ivan Provorov this summer. So there is some help there. I think Columbus can definitely sneak in, especially if another team regresses, like Washington, for example. I don't see any reason they won't be in it until the end again, for a wild card spot, especially if guys like Fantilli and Johnson really take off.
Well, one of the teams, actually the team that made it the farthest of any team in the Metro Division this last season, that's probably going to be looking to take the next step, is the Carolina Hurricanes. So they are going to be entering the season this year with some new faces, namely Nikolai Ehlers and Keandre Miller, who they got during the offseason. So they're also going to have some young talent, though, that they'll likely have to rely on quite a bit this season. Guys like Jackson Blake, Logan Stankoven, Alexander Nikishin. I mean, do you think, Mike, that this is going to end up being too much change for Carolina in one season, or do you really think that they are going to come back looking better than they did last year?
I think the addition of Ehlers, who signed as a free agent, is going to be refreshing for them, because obviously they tried to trade for Mikko Rantanen, and that did not work because he didn't want to be in Carolina. The addition of Miller after the exodus of Pesce and now Brent Burns, and their defense was not as good last year as it was the previous years. But again, Eric Tulsky hasn't learned a lesson. this team is only going to go as far as their goaltending, just like Columbus. And Rod Brind'Amour clearly does not have any confidence in Pyotr Kochetkov because he keeps going to Freddie Anderson in the playoffs. So either he gives Kochetkov the number one job because Anderson is at the end of a pretty good career and sees what Kochetkov can do, or you go out and get a goaltender, and they seem to be allergic in terms of going out and getting – they didn't trade for John Gibson. They didn't sign Carter Hart. They're staying with Anderson and Kochetkov. Well, I think you're only going to go as far as Kochetkov will take you, and I don't know if they're ever going to get there in terms of having confidence in him.
Yeah, it's a good point. And with Anderson's injury history, his lengthy injury history as well, that's something to consider, of course, especially for a team that's really looking to take the next step here. I mean, John, what do you think first of Mike's point about the goaltending, but also, I mean, all of these new pieces they've brought in? I mean, between the veterans and the young faces, do you think it's going to be too much too soon for Carolina?
With the goaltending, I think, kind of going off of what Mike said, I think this year is kind of going to be now or never for Kochetkov. Like, if he can't handle it and if he doesn't show the signs of improvement, if he doesn't show that he can, take on a larger workload, then I think Tulsky and company are going to have to pivot a little bit. As for the, the forwards and the turnover, throughout the lineup, I think they are more talented than they were, as a whole. Like, I think people don't realize how talented Nikishin is. And I think, if he can really hit his potential and play the way he was playing in Russia, that's a potential number one guy. Rod Brind'Amour, he runs a tight ship. He's got a good system in place there. So it's going to come down to how fast the young guys can learn and implement that. But, in theory, I think they're more talented. They're more set up to, score throughout the lineup and go far, even though they still don't quite have, that star power that they thought they had in Rantanen last year. But, I like what they did. I like their approach. They're staying patient, not overcommitting to anything right now. While their window is still open. So I still like them as a team going into the season.
All right. Well, let's shift over to a team in the Metro that a lot of people are going to have their eyes on this year for a variety of reasons, and that is the New York Rangers, obviously coming off an incredibly disappointing season in 2024-25 that saw them not even make the playoffs after being the President's Trophy winners the year before. So lots of eyes on that team. Of course, they've got a new coach in Mike Sullivan. Their front office has been under quite a bit of scrutiny, and with good reason, I think, for a lot of the stories we've heard out of New York. But I want to look specifically at the guys that they have on their roster. So they've got top end talent. You can't deny that. I mean, you've got Artemi Panarin, Adam Fox, JT Miller, Mika Zibanejad, all of that. And yet they had the season that they had last year. And specifically, they ranked 28th on the power play last year. That's pretty remarkable considering those names I just listed. They were also only 12th in overall goals for last season. So, I mean, Mike, do you think that Sullivan is going to be able to, unlock a new level of offense for this team? And looking at players in particular, like a Alexis Lafreniere, for example, do you think that he can really help get his trajectory back on track? I mean, what do you see happening for the Rangers this year?
Well, the change in coaching is definitely going to be a benefit because Sullivan, I think, needed a change of scenery from the sinking ship in Pittsburgh, and he's an excellent coach. A lot of things stemmed from Adam Fox having probably the worst year of his career, and I think he's a Norris Trophy candidate all the time. So I expect him to bounce back, and hopefully there'll be a little calm compared to the way how chaotic it was last year. You've got a number of factors. Panarin is entering the last year of his contract. He's going to be motivated to pick up put big numbers on the board. I think Zibanejad, he blocked it, didn't want to waive his no move clause. He wants to be there. He's going to have to show that he wants to be there by playing better. I like Lafreniere as a talent. JT Miller had an injury in training camp. Don't know how long he's going to be out, whether he'll make the season opener. The one thing about their defense that I don't like is they have a great top pairing in Gavrikov and Fox, and then the 3 through 6 is not up to snuff. I think Braden Schneider has to step up and be really good for them to have a good chance to make the playoffs. But they have possibly the best tandem in the NHL still in Shesterkin and Quick. So because of that, I think they're going to make the playoffs, and I think they're going to push for a top 3 spot in the Metro Division.
John, what do you think? Do you think that we see the Rangers bounce back? Do you think the changes they've made are going to be enough?
I don't see their changes being anything spectacular. I think definitely with the addition of Sullivan, as the coach, I think they'll be better. You hope that the working environment for the players is going to be better than it was last year. Obviously, Chris Drury is still, in charge, and I think he got an extension this summer as well. So that's a little bit of a strange one. But on the whole, I do think that they should at least be firmly in the mix for, a playoff spot towards the bottom end of the playoff teams. How much, they can take, how far they can take it depends on how much they get from guys like Fox and Gavrikov. And also if they can get a little bit of offense from the second and third defense pairings, that would help Fox a lot, I think. And they don't have as much of that potential as they do or as they did without Keandre Miller, who's in Carolina now. So there's a lot of moving parts with this. But yeah, I think generally they should still be in the mix. I just don't see them as that upper echelon team anymore.
Well, and to Mike's point, I do think that the contract situation with Artemi Panarin is going to continue to be a distraction for this team until something gets resolved. So we'll keep an eye on what happens there. Let's head over to Long Island. So it was an eventful first offseason for Mathieu Darche, obviously a new GM on Long Island for the New York Islanders, replaces Lou Lamoriello. And for his troubles was given a first overall pick, which he used, of course, to draft Matthew Schaefer in this year's draft. So beyond that, though, he's been busy this offseason. So he's traded away Noah Dobson. That was the team's top defenseman. He drafted top tier prospects in addition to Schaefer, guys like Victor Eklund and Keyshawn Aitchison. So considering the high end players that the Islanders still have on their current roster, like Matt Barzal, Bo Horvat, Adam Pelech, Ilya Sorokin. I mean, do you think that Darche is going to try to push the team in a competitive direction, Mike? Or do you think they're going to continue to sell off pieces for a larger rebuild this season?
Well, he acted and has acted this summer like they want this team to be competitive. I mean, the one thing that Lou Lamoriello refused to do is add the scoring that they needed. Now he added Jonathan Drouin, who had a decent couple years in Colorado. He's more of a secondary player. They're really betting on Maxim Shabanov to be somebody who adds some offense, and they need Barzal to stay healthy. On defense, I mean, they're definitely depending on Schaefer to replace Dobson. I don't like to put too much pressure on an 18-year-old kid, but he seems to be a very special 18-year-old kid. But it's going to come down to Ilya Sorokin. He had a .907 save percentage last year, and he played 61 games because Varlamov got hurt. They added big game David Rittich as just in case Varlamov can't stay healthy. They need to lessen the games that Sorokin is playing, and if he plays 50 to 55 and plays up to his capabilities, they have a chance to challenge for a playoff spot.
Well, I look at this Islanders team and what it looks like they're kind of trying to do. It's a little bit of a thread the needle situation. Like you want to be competitive in the present, but also build for the future. I would say to Mathieu Darche as a precautionary tale, a cautionary tale. Maybe you look over at Nashville, see what Barry Trotz is doing or tried to do, and how that's worked out. So there are risks that come with that, right? But John, I mean, what do you think with the moves that have been made? Do you think that this Islanders team is a playoff team this year?
I lean towards no, but I see a world where they can do it. I think, like Mike said, a lot depends on Ilya Sorokin. If he can be like a 920 goalie and not a 905 goalie, that's a pretty huge difference. I've also seen, covering the preseason, I've seen Matthew Schaefer play a few times, and he looks pretty good, for his age. I probably expect him to stay, on the NHL team and play the year with them. He looks like he belongs. Like he's a beast, especially on the power play. So if he can be like a fraction of as productive as Dobson was, at his peak on Long Island, then yeah, like, maybe they do make it. I wouldn't be going out of my way to try and push them to make it, like, trading assets, to make a playoff push. But, maybe they stay the course and they make it, and, great for them. Like they have the talent. It's a matter of, do the wheels fall off the wagon before that happens?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Islanders. It's a different looking team this year, but like you said, I could see a world where it happens. So should be interesting to watch. All right. Well, we talked a little bit about obviously with the Rangers, their new coach, Mike Sullivan, coming over from Pittsburgh. So let's talk about the Penguins. Considering the way that last season went for Pittsburgh, they have seemingly had pretty much every major contributor from their lineup involved in trade rumors in the last year. I mean, you've got Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Eric Carlson, Brian Rust, Ricard Raquel. All of these guys have ended up at the center of trade rumors. They have also still got term left on their deals, all of them. So Kyle Dubas doesn't have to trade them. But we know obviously this is a team that is headed for a full scale rebuild in Pittsburgh. That was part of why, as you mentioned, Mike Sullivan was due for a change of scenery. So probably, girding their loins for some rough years, some rough seasons in Pittsburgh here coming up as they take on this rebuild. So realistically, Mike, who do you think is left on this roster by the end of the season?
Scorched earth. I don't think any of them will be back. I mean, if Sidney Crosby wants to stay, he's going to stay. It's up to him. I don't understand why he would. If it's loyal to the organization, I get it. But, I look at Evgeny Malkin and I say, gee, 50% retained, he'll be $3 million. Florida could fit that guy in. I mean, that just makes too much sense. I'll get my turban. I'll be Karnak the Magnificent. I'll make that prediction. But I mean, right now they have 9 unrestricted free agents. They're going to trade most of them. Now they're going to have to take salary back to stay over the salary cap floor. But you can move Eric Carlson. You can move that contract, retain 50%. I think they're going to do that. I think they're going to trade everything that's not nailed down. And Sidney Crosby may be nailed down, but I would encourage him to decide to go someplace else to finish out his career.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of people were surprised that some of those guys weren't traded last year, this past trade deadline, or even the offseason. So maybe just playing a little bit of a waiting game. Timing is everything. But John, are you in agreement with Mike? Do you think any of those guys are still on this roster by the end of the year?
Yeah, if I was the Penguins, I would be trying to, sell off as much as I can. Obviously, you want the right deal, and I think they're gonna probably ride it out and see where they are in January, February, March. But right now, I don't see a reason to think that they're going to be seriously in it, to where it's going to be worth Crosby's while, worth Malkin's while to, stick it out and see what happens. I mean, it's the end of an era is what it is. So, same thing with Washington. Like you're holding on, but there's not a lot to hold on to, and you start sliding down the ladder more and more. So I think the Penguins, if I was them, I would kind of just accept it. But I do expect them to at least give it a try and see where they are first.
Yeah, totally fair. And Crosby has said many times he's had no ambition to leave Pittsburgh, but like you said, Mike may have a change of heart at some point, depending on how things go here. John, you mentioned Washington, so let's talk about the Capitals. They had, they were an interesting team last year. Of course, the biggest storyline was Alex Ovechkin chasing the all-time scoring record, but, of course, Spencer Carberry as well, just really turning this team around. It really was, remarkable. The reason that they had one of the, such a great season was not just Ovechkin and not just Carberry. I mean, they had several players throughout the lineup who turned in career years last year. I mean, guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois, Tom Wilson, Jacob Chychrun, Alexei Protas, and they also had stellar goaltending from Logan Thompson and from Charlie Lindgren. So do we think, Mike, that the Capitals are going to turn in a similar season to last year? Or do you think they're going to prove that last year wasn't just a one-off? Or do you think we see some regression here, especially knowing that this is going to be Ovechkin's final season with the team as well?
I think there's going to be regression. I mean, they had 51 wins last year. That's fantastic. I think it would be natural to see a little bit of that. I mean, I don't know if Ovechkin is going to be motivated as much as he was last year. He scored 44 goals in 65 games. Nobody expected that. But there is a lot of talent there. I mean, Tom Wilson scored 33 goals. Nobody expected Protas to score 30. I think the big addition to them right now is Ryan Leonard, who could be a top 9 forward already. And if he has success as a rookie, could move into the top 6. So they're going to need that goaltending, Thompson and Lindgren, to play off of each other, and they're going to need to play good team defense like they did last year. And if they do that, then I think they'll definitely finish in the top 3. But I think Carolina probably has to be favored for the division.
Yeah, John, what do you think? Do you think that Washington can prove that last year wasn't just a one-off, or are we going to see some regression here?
Yeah, generally speaking, I do think the Capitals are a solid team. I think Spencer Carberry is a phenomenal coach. At the same time, I would still say that, Ovi, as old as he is now, is still their best player. So I think if he regresses, they're naturally going to regress too. But I also see a world where, maybe Ovi does regress, but then maybe Leonard is more productive than people expect, and then they kind of cancel each other out. They do have a decent roster top to bottom, but I probably would not expect them to win 50 games again. I would say probably closer to like the low 40s, like 43, 44. And then maybe they sneak in a wild card, similar to the Rangers, where, yeah, they have the talent, but are they going to, keep it together the whole time? Who knows? But they do have talent. I would expect them to definitely be in the mix. How far they take it, I wouldn't expect too much.
All right. Well, that brings us to our final team in the Metropolitan Division on this preview here. So, of course, we got to talk about the Philadelphia Flyers. They are going to be an interesting team to watch. They've got an influx of young talent that's coming in, going to be competing for elevated roles in the lineup this year. Guys like Trevor Zegras, Nikita Grabenkin, Jet Luchenko. I mean, John, I'll start with you on this one. I mean, how do you think Rick Tocchet, obviously first year as head coach of the Flyers, how do you think he plans on organizing the forwards in Philadelphia this season? And do you think there's anyone who could potentially surprise fans as far as having a bigger role this year in Philly?
Yeah, Taka actually has already told us like his philosophy with the forwards. He likes to do pairs, right? So it would be like something like Sean Couturier and Travis Konechny, and then maybe I don't know, Owen Tippett's on their wing, and then if Tippett isn't playing well, then someone else will jump in with Couturier and Konechny. So he likes to do pairs. So far, we've seen Zegras and Michkov, Couturier, Konechny. He likes to keep together the line of Tyson Forster, Noah Cates, and Bobby Brink. So I think he's got that down, at least to start the year, and then we'll see where it goes. Potential surprise: Nikita Gravenkin right now is playing on the first line with Couturier and Konechny. Tocchet talks about him a lot as a sticky guy. 3 seasons I've been covering the Flyers. I've seen a lot of live action games here, and Gravenkin has really impressed me with his puck protection, just going up like on the wall, playing below the goal line. He's one of the best I've seen, and he's a young guy. So if they can continue to teach him, the North American game, I think this is going to be his second season now in North America, and he's still only 22. Like he's got a long runway still. So if he can, put the soft skill with the size and the play style, you can have a pretty big year. And then, maybe the Flyers are better than people think.
Mike, what do you think we should expect from the Flyers this year? I mean, obviously, this is a team, as I said, with a lot of youth coming in, a little bit of a wild card in that regard, just not knowing what to expect. But I mean, what do you think we see from this team this year?
My expectations are not very high, but in terms of them being competitive, I did think that this changeover to Tocchet was a good one. I think they needed to sort of flush the Tortorella era away. They have some good young players that I think they should give a lot of ice time. Let's see what you have in Lutsenko. Give minutes to Michkov. See if Trevor Zegras can be a top 6 center. Defensively, I think they need to find out what Jamie Drysdale is, if he can get past all the injuries. But I mean, I don't. This team is not competitive. I don't think. I mean, now Tocchet can make them competitive, but I don't know in the long-term picture of them whether that's beneficial. They should be in the Gavin McKenna sweepstakes. But I think that, Tocchet is going to be motivated to get them to overachieve, and that will probably have them miss the playoffs, but be in that middle range, which no team wants to be in. By the way, Gravenkin, Leaf draft pick who was acquired in the Scott Lawton trade, he's a buzzsaw. In the few moments I saw him as a Leaf, I said he's like a future Ivan Barbashev. I think that's a pretty good comparison, and he may be better than Barbashev in a lot less time. That's for Leaf fans. That's a player I think they regret trading.
All right. And well, we also heard Scott Lawton going to be out week to week with an injury now for Toronto. So right now, Philadelphia's got to be feeling pretty good about the trade right now. So we'll see what happens there. But it sounds like we think kind of overall, do we think Carolina is still the favorite to win the Metro this year, Mike?
Yeah, I would be surprised if Carolina doesn't win the division. Obviously, the goaltending is going to be a big factor there. If they don't win it, then I think it's probably the Devils. But again, the Devils have that injury issue, and if you can get Hamilton and Hughes to play 70 to 75 games, then I think they can give the Hurricanes a run for their money. All the other teams, everything has got to go right for them to challenge for first place. So I would say it's either Carolina or New Jersey.
John, you in agreement with that?
Yeah, I personally lean more towards the Devils, but the Hurricanes, are what they are. They're a well-oiled machine. Maybe their additions and subtractions aren't, too much for them, whereas the Devils are mostly the same. But yeah, like Mike said, a lot depends on the health, but on paper, I would lean the Devils.
All right. Well, you heard it here first. Those are your predictions for the Metropolitan Division title this year. That is going to do it for today's Metro Division preview here at the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News. The Hockey News has been the go-to for all things hockey since 1947. 12 issues packed with game and player insights, plus a free issue to start. It's a must-have for any fan. Head to thn.com/free and get your subscription today. That is going to do it for today's episode of the Wraparound. Thank you, as always, to everyone who tuned in to listen to us talking some hockey today. We will be back with an all-new episode next week. For Mike Augello and Jonathan Bailey, I'm Emma Lingan. This is the Wraparound, and we will see you next time.